I thought I was engaged to the man I'd spend my life with. Then he mocked my body in public to impress his friend. I walked away and found out he'd been living a double life behind my back. I didn't beg. I didn't fight. I chose myself. And everything changed. I twisted the engagement ring around my finger, watching Dominic order another round. 5 years together, 8 months engaged, and I still felt like I was waiting for him to fully arrive. "She's gained weight since we got engaged," he said to Paul, loud enough for half the bar to hear. Good thing I locked her down before she really let herself go. The words hit like ice water. I set down my drink and stared at him. Paul laughed, slapping Dominic's shoulder. Smart man. They always get comfortable once they have the ring. I stood up, my chair scraping. "I'm going home." Dominic barely looked up. "Come on, babe. I'm just kidding around." "No, you're not. You're performing for him." "Don't be dramatic," he said, his voice carrying that edge I'd been hearing more often lately. I walked out into the cool night air, my hands shaking. Behind me, I heard Paul's voice. "She'll get over it. They always do." The 20-minute walk home gave me too much time to think. About the jokes that weren't jokes. About how small I'd been feeling lately. About the way Dominic's eyes had gone cold when he looked at me. I unlocked our apartment door and went straight to the bedroom. The wedding planning folder sat on my nightstand, full of dreams that suddenly felt foreign. I touched the ring again, remembering when it had felt like a promise instead of a trap. My phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. "Don't wait up." I turned off the light and lay in the dark, wondering when I'd stopped recognizing the man I was supposed to marry. The next morning at the dental office, Maria knocked on my door during lunch break. She looked nervous, clutching her phone. "I need to show you something," she said. I wasn't sure if I should, but she held out her phone. A photo filled the screen, Paul and Dominic at some party I'd never heard about, Paul's arm around a blonde woman I didn't recognize. "Paul sent this to my boyfriend last week," Maria said quietly, with a message about how Dominic was finally having fun again since getting engaged. I studied the image. Dominic's face was flushed with alcohol, his smile wide and careless. The timestamp showed last Friday, the night he'd told me he was working late. "There's more," Maria said, swiping to the next image. "Paul's been sending these for months. He calls it documenting Dom's bachelor freedom." Each photo was another lie. Dominic at bars I'd never been to, with people I'd never met. Always Paul orchestrating, always Paul's commentary about how marriage was killing Dominic's spirit. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Paul told my boyfriend you're the reason Dominic's been so miserable lately, that you're suffocating him." She paused. "But looking at these photos, it seems like Paul's the one encouraging him to act single." I handed back her phone, my chest tight. "How long has this been going on?" "Since your engagement party. Paul made a big show of toasting your future, then started this group chat the next day." I thought about all the nights Dominic had come home distant, smelling like cigarettes he'd quit smoking years ago. All the times he'd been too tired to talk, too stressed to be present. After Maria left, I sat alone in my office, staring at my computer screen. Paul hadn't just been undermining our relationship, he'd been actively sabotaging it while pretending to be Dominic's friend. But the worst part wasn't Paul's manipulation. It was realizing that Dominic had let it happen. I drove to Valerie's house after work, needing someone who'd known Dominic longer than I had. She opened the door before I could knock, her face creased with worry. "He called me," she said, leading me to her kitchen. "Said you two had a fight." "Did he tell you what he said to me?" Valerie poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. "He said you were upset about some joke he made. He publicly humiliated me to impress Paul, and apparently it's been going on for months." Valerie's face hardened. "Paul, you know about this?" "I know Paul's been a poison in my son's ear since high school. Dominic's father did the same thing. Had friends who told him marriage was a trap, that commitment was weakness. The kitchen fell quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. Valerie stared into her coffee. I stayed too long, she said finally. Made excuses, hoped he'd change, convinced myself that love was enough. It took me 15 years to learn that you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. What are you saying? I'm saying my son has a choice to make. He can keep letting Paul define what manhood looks like, or he can grow up and decide for himself. But you have a choice too. You don't have to wait around for him to figure it out. I felt tears building. I love him. I know you do, sweetheart. But love isn't supposed to make you smaller. We sat in comfortable silence until Dominic's truck pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I watched him walk slowly toward the house, his shoulders tense. He entered the kitchen and stopped when he saw me. I figured you'd be here. Sit down, Valerie said firmly. We need to talk. Dominic remained standing, his jaw set. I already apologized. No, I said. You minimized. There's a difference. For the first time in months, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face, but instead of vulnerability, he chose defense. I can't do this right now. This is exactly the kind of drama Paul warned me about. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Valerie's face went pale. Then go, I said quietly. Go back to Paul and let him plan your life. Dominic hesitated at the threshold, and for a moment I thought he might stay. Instead, he walked out, leaving the door open behind him. I found the honeymoon reservation letter that night, buried under a stack of bills. Cabo San Lucas, oceanfront suite, paid in full. Our dream trip, planned for next month. I sat on the couch with the letter in my hands, remembering how excited we'd been when we booked it. Dominic had researched restaurants, planned sunset walks, talked about how we'd finally have time to just be together. That version of him felt like a stranger now. My phone rang. Lena's name appeared on the screen. Valerie called me, she said without preamble. Are you okay? I don't know. I folded the letter carefully. I keep thinking about who he used to be, or who I thought he was. People change, honey. Sometimes they grow toward you, sometimes they grow away. What if I'm the problem? What if I really am too demanding, too? Stop. Lena's voice cut through my spiral. I've watched you shrink yourself for months trying to make him comfortable. That's not love. That's accommodation. I thought about the bar, about Paul's photos, about Dominic walking out of his mother's kitchen rather than face the truth. I think I know what I have to do. What do you need? Help canceling a honeymoon. The next morning, I called the resort. The cancellation fee was steep, but they agreed to convert our reservation to a single occupancy room for half the original dates. When Dominic came home that afternoon, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the letter and our laptop open to travel websites. What's this? He asked, eyeing the papers. I'm going to Cabo, alone. His face went through several expressions before settling on confusion. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything. This is insane. You're throwing away 5 years over one stupid comment? I'm choosing myself over someone who's forgotten how to choose me. He sat down heavily, running his hands through his hair. For a moment, he looked like the man I'd fallen in love with. Vulnerable, uncertain, human. I don't know how to fix this, he said quietly. I know, I said. That's why I'm leaving. The plane lifted off 3 weeks later, and I pressed my forehead against the window, watching the city shrink below. I'd moved out of our apartment, back into Lena's spare room temporarily. The engagement ring sat in a small box in my purse. I couldn't bring myself to pawn it yet, but I couldn't wear it either. Dominic had tried calling twice. Once to ask if I was really doing this, once to tell me Paul thought I was being manipulative. I'd stopped answering after that. The resort was everything we'd dreamed it would be. Turquoise water, white sand, rooms that opened onto infinity pools. I checked into the oceanfront suite alone, tipping the bellhop who tried not to stare at my single suitcase. I spent the first day by the pool reading a book I'd bought at the airport, a romance novel about second chances and self-discovery. "Honeymoon?" asked the woman at the next chair. She was maybe 60, tanned and confident in a way I envied. "Solo moon," I said. "It's a new trend." She laughed. "I like that. I'm here celebrating my divorce, 25 years of marriage, and I finally remembered who I was before I became half of something else." We talked for hours, about careers and dreams and the versions of ourselves we'd lost in relationships. She told me about the pottery class she'd always wanted to take, the novel she'd started writing, the trip to Iceland she'd booked for the fall. "What about you?" she asked. "What did you put on hold?" I thought about the photography classes I'd skipped for wedding planning, the promotion I hadn't pursued because Dominic worried about my work schedule, the friends I'd seen less often to spend more time trying to fix what was breaking between us. "Everything," I said. That night, I ate dinner alone at the resort's nicest restaurant. The waiter brought champagne, compliments of the gentleman at table 12, but I politely declined and sent it back. I wasn't ready for anyone else's attention. I was still learning how to be alone without feeling lonely. I took the ring out of its box and held it up to the candlelight. It caught the flame and threw tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. Beautiful, expensive, and completely wrong for who I was becoming. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd find a jewelry store in town. Not to pawn it, but to transform it into something that belonged only to me. I found the jewelry store on my last morning in Cabo, tucked between a coffee shop and a bookstore in the town square. The owner, Elena, spoke perfect English and listened patiently as I explained what I wanted. "You want to redesign the ring completely?" "I want to keep the stone but make it mine," I said. "Something that represents who I'm becoming, not who I was trying to be." She sketched several options, a pendant, earrings, a completely different ring setting. I chose a simple necklace design, elegant and understated. "It will be ready in 2 hours. There's a good coffee shop next door if you want to wait nearby." I spent those 2 hours walking through the town, taking photos with my phone. Street art, morning markets, children playing in fountains, images that had nothing to do with couples or romance or the life I'd been planning. When I returned, Elena handed me a small velvet box. Inside was the necklace, my diamond reimagined as a delicate pendant on a thin gold chain. It looked nothing like an engagement ring and everything like a promise I was making to myself. "It's perfect," I said, fastening it around my neck. "New beginnings deserve new forms," Elena said, smiling. On the plane home, I scrolled through the photos I'd taken over the past week. There I was by the pool, reading. At dinner, raising a glass to myself. On the beach at sunset, arms spread wide toward the horizon. In every image, I looked like someone I was still getting to know. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a photo, Dominic and Paul at another bar, another night, another performance of friendship that looked more like destruction. I deleted the message without reading the accompanying text. Whatever Paul was trying to prove, whatever game he was still playing, I was no longer a participant. The necklace caught the airplane's overhead light, and I touched it gently. My diamond, my choice, my life stretching out ahead of me like an unwritten story. 6 months later, I stood in my new apartment, hanging the last of my Cabo photographs on the wall. The space was smaller than what Dominic and I had shared, but it felt enormous in all the ways that mattered. Lena knocked and entered with coffee and pastries from our favorite bakery. "How does it feel?" "Like coming home to myself," I said. I'd gotten the promotion at work, started the photography classes, reconnected with friends I'd neglected. The pottery class would start next month, a gift to myself inspired by the divorced woman at the resort. "Any word from him?" Lena asked carefully. "Valerie texted last week. He's in therapy now. Apparently Paul's not in the picture anymore. And how do you feel about that? I considered the question while sipping my coffee. 6 months ago, the news would have filled me with hope, with the possibility of reconciliation. Now it just felt like information, important for his growth, but separate from my journey. I hope he finds what he needs, I said honestly, but I'm not waiting to see if he does. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, but this time it wasn't Paul's manipulation. It was a message from the photography instructor about a gallery featuring student work. My sunset beach photo had been selected for display. I showed Lena the message, and she squealed with excitement. "Your first gallery show." "My first everything lately," I said, touching the necklace that had become my talisman of transformation. That evening, I sat on my small balcony with a glass of wine and my travel journal from Cabo. I'd started writing in it during the trip and hadn't stopped. Stories, observations, plans for the future. The letter from the honeymoon reservation was pressed between the pages, not as a memento of loss, but as proof that I'd chosen myself when it mattered most. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of possibility. Tomorrow I'd start planning my next solo trip. Iceland maybe, inspired by my poolside friend, or Thailand, or Morocco, or anywhere that called to the woman I was becoming. My phone rang, and for just a moment I wondered if it might be Dominic. But when I looked at the screen, it was Maria from work, inviting me to her birthday party. "I'll be there," I said, and meant it. I closed the journal and went inside, leaving the door open to let in the evening air. Somewhere in the city, Dominic was probably learning to be alone too, figuring out who he was without Paul's influence or my accommodation. I wished him well in that journey, but I no longer felt responsible for it. The necklace caught the light from my kitchen, and I smiled. My diamond, my story, my beautifully uncertain future stretching out like an open road.